What's going on, everyone? My name is MGTheFuture. I got another exclusive tutorial for you guys at the Maschine Masters. Today I'll be using FL Studio, of course, and I'll be talking about two different topics in terms of producers and trying to marry them together. The core underlying topic is about is there a formula for hit songs? And then from that topic, we get type of beats like BigHead On The Beat type beat versus an A1 type beat. And those are the two concepts I'm going to mix together. But I want to spend some time kind of talking about each producer respectively. So let me start with BigHead On The Beat. Now, I never knew him by name. In fact, he seems by and large one of the producers that produces for a lot of the new up and coming artists that I haven't really gotten a chance to listen to. Of course, one of his biggest songs out right now is the Gucci Gang with Lil Pump. And then, of course, Lil Peep, who passed away, rest in peace, Famous Dex, and a lot of other littles. And there's nothing wrong with that. But he seems to have the monopoly for this particular class of rappers. And when I listen to his particular productions, it's very interesting how a guy from Los Angeles is kind of tapped in to the Atlanta production scene, however, albeit with his own influences. And when I listen to his stuff, I see that he's very much in tune with Lex Luger and very much in tune with Zaytoven. And a lot of his stuff reflects that. And it's pretty cool that he can kind of hybridize that style like I would hybridize a Timberland and Dr. Dre and come up with something that's becoming his own distinct style. So it's pretty interesting. If you haven't checked him out before, definitely check him out because it does not appear that he is slowing down, especially if you're into that kind of sound. A1, on the other hand, Floyd Bentley, he's done a lot of R&B stuff for a very long time, at least for the past 5 years or better. I first became aware of him by name on the Chris Brown Royalty album. And of course, he's on Love and Hip Hop right now. And he does a lot of interesting stuff if you just pay attention to some of his discography. And most of it appears to be throwback R&B mixed with today's drums and arrangements. In fact, I would stretch it to say that he marries the chord progressions and even the writing styles of older R&B with whatever trend in trap is working simultaneously. Like I've caught a few of the tracks and I caught wind of like a DJ Mustard influence, or I caught wind of that joint Future did, the Molly Percocet track. Like he has that type of flute beat. Depending on what time and era it is, he'll take the Mount Rushmore song of that year and whatever the elements are and mix it with R&B. And that's kind of how like we all do. But it feels like in terms of if there's a formula for hit songs, which he's been on a podcast talking about, or he was asked about it as far as Atlantic Records and Mike Caren in his book of hit song formulas, I would imagine these two guys are at least subconsciously aware of it. A1 more so than the other because he's acknowledged that the book exists. But BigHead On The Beat too, they kind of do not seem to deviate from particular structures and formulas. And that could be a bad thing, that could be a good thing. There's a whole bunch of gray area here when we're talking about the right thing to do, but I'm talking about them because one's on Billboard pushing #1 position, and the other one's on Billboard for a #1 album with a majority of his catalog on that album. So let's get into my thinking about the production itself. I have a folder here. I'm trying to stay organized. So first I want to deal with is A1. Since he interpolates a lot of R&B, I said, well, let me do the same. Let me interpolate some R&B and kind of marry my own influence into it. In this particular example, I borrowed from Lauryn Hill's X Factor. And when I listen to songs like that, or I think about interpolation, I think about the part of the song, especially R&B, that has the most emotional impact. And in this case, it was her vamp section. So I had to filter it to all get out to even get a piece that was kind of usable. And I use that as a framework for everything else. So check it out, the filtered and pitched version. And I believe that was done simply with, yeah, BX Clean Sweep Pro and the stereo shaper. And then I filtered it one more time. And then from there, I start working on chords and what have you. The chord progression, I always start with first with a very generic piano. I actually started with the bridge first because that was a little bit more tricky. And because I knew this was going to be an interpolation and I was going to use the voices, I wanted to see if I can push this knowing that it in itself exists and it's already hot. But how do I transform that into something that I'm known for? And so far, of course, Trap Next Door and Trapanese. So I thought about that concept and I had to change the scale and key of both that vocal sample and the original music in general, and try to force it into what I do with Trapanese. And I did it with silent for the bass, which we're accustomed to hearing from like Drake and Tory Lanez. This new Prophet 5 VST by the homies over there at UHE. Really dope pads in here, very analog Prophet sounding. And Serum, of course, for the piano, Serum for the voice. And I end up pitching it. And to keep track of all of that, I put down the BPM of her song, the key of her song, and then the new key of my song. And I'm just using MIDI out to kind of keep those notes there. So if I go back later and try to refigure myself out, I'm keeping better notes, I should say. But then I changed this key, and this is the new version of it. And I gave it a little bit more Trapanese feel. So check that out. And the second part, of course, I needed something simpler because I wanted this to be more modern. And I don't want to drag it all the way out, kind of how, you know, we do with the Drake and Tory Lanez stuff. So I needed a shorter piano part. And that particular song I'm referencing, the intro has some interesting chords, and I wanted to loop those up. But the same exact theory, I needed to switch them up so it fit my Trapanese style and rechange the key and the pitch and everything. So I ended up doing that here, and I'll let you guys hear that too. So that's more my speed, although I'm already using the formula of something that exists already, that worked already, that had an emotional impact already. I'm now slowly starting it to merge it with my own taste. And that's something I think BigHead may not be conscious of based on what he's listening to, but I can hear it. Like if he can't hear it, I can hear it for him. In A1, the very same thing, since this particular part of the video is really about what he does and some of the techniques that he tends to pull from is from modern music and from his own influences. The last part of this is real simple. It's hard to marry these two together, but I went ahead and processed them with the Zoom sample track, you know, / SP404. And when you resample in lo-fi, it augments the spacing of instruments, especially with that Prophet 5 VST. I wanted it to be more real. So I lo-fi'd everything and it kind of compressed it, and it did something really strange to it. So that ended up being my last step, and that also ended up being the longest step because I had to do every track one by one. I didn't want to take any shortcuts. So I had to figure that out first before I did anything else. And for the most part, I got it working. And of course it sounds filtered already, so I don't have to worry about filtering it later. So that's that part of the tutorial, just some of my thinking behind interpolation and taking existing formulas as far as chord structures and things and flipping it and making it your own. The second part was more about BigHead beats than anything else. I looked really close at the Gucci Gang drums and try to figure out, why is that arrangement so short? Why is there a song that's 2 minutes and 30 seconds, nearly #1 on Billboard? And the drums repeat a whole lot. And he's just dropping things in and out, very similar to some of my Metro Boomin tutorials. So I just want to show you this rhythm. It's really simple. He has some hi-hats. I'll play them pattern by pattern. And he's using the space. It sounds like they're automating it or cutting it in the mix, but I programmed the drums that way first. And the drums are just simple. These particular kicks are just following the rhythm of his bass. We don't even have to play that. The clap and the snare is just a clap and a snare. And the rim shot, which we all know really stands out from Beethoven, especially this pattern. But then the lazy feeling of it is something that Metro borrowed. So I heard all those influences, so I just put that pattern back together for you know, just to get an understanding of what they're doing. And in doing it, I saw it already. I said, I saw this when I did the Metro Boomin tutorial. However, in context of Gucci Gang, you don't hear Metro, you don't hear Beethoven. You hear something different, kinda, because his bass textures are different. And he's playing chords, which is very interesting, which is why I picked these two guys. So this will all make sense in one moment. So that's that. And then the final phase of this, I kind of tapped into A1. I said, well, Gucci Gang is heading towards #1 right now, whether we like it or not. So how do I marry that and then marry the stuff that I like, the Trapanese, Trap Next Door, and the throwback R&B, and put it together? So I created a new session. I saved that drum session, created a new file, and I went ahead and imported all my lo-fi files. And I put together a short arrangement just to show you the context of how something like this works. Now, because YouTube, it loves music channels and loves policing us, I'm going to filter out the Gucci Gang part of his voice, which I was able to use the stereo shaper to isolate. And since I'm already focused on his drum pattern, it blends in with the filtered sound of his original song, which I did a DIY acapella out of. But the main thing to take away from here, similar to my previous videos on Trap Next Door, I use these audio files, but I ended up pitching them down. And because this project's a whole different tempo than my composition, I had to time stretch it. But in order to time stretch from the original to this one and keep the key of the song, I ended up using stretch mode. And then also to give it some variation, I pitched it either up 12 octave or 12 steps, which is 1 whole octave, or down. And this is like one of the examples of what that sounds like. So it's faster, but it's a different pitch. And I did it a few more times too. This one's pitched down. So it has a different bounce already, and it kind of loses the original composition that I showed you guys. It takes it out of that element. Basically, I'm sampling myself, which is then me, an interpolation of me sampling someone else whoever composed that was influenced by older R&B. So I'm kind of like on the 4th generation of that style, but I modernize it with the filtering from the resampling and of course the time stretch, the speed. And you're going to hear this, or if you've never seen this or heard music this way, you're going to quickly realize that some of these hit formulas is that we have a lot of music coming out which is recycled. In our particular generation, our answer to the copyright issues, our answer to the publishing issues, our answer to the record company attacking hip hop, really, has really been like a kickback against pure golden era hip hop for sampling older artists and records. We have adapted to that by searching for the aesthetic of those classic sounds and reinventing those techniques and marrying it with what we're doing now, which is trap, which is largely still trap. Even after going on 10 years, we're still doing trap, but now we're introducing R&B back into it. Now we're introducing some of the golden era sampling styles into it in our own way. So these are all very similar things. Lil Peep does it. I peep game on some of his joints. A1 does it. And what's cool about A1, he's a partner or good friend of Ayo, and Ayo's R&B is crazy. Like his drums and bass, nutty. That needs its own video. And then he writes songs with Young Berg, who's rebranded himself as Hitmaker, and you'll hear that in all the Chris Brown intros, even the new Ty Dolla $ign, you'll hear it. And that's them as a team, or them running out of their own studio. And they all, even Jeremiah, all of them, you hear it. It's 90s R&B reinvented today. So I think I might know what that formula is. But check it out. Here's my interpretation of these two guys. the Gucci Gang and what made that interesting, the bounce, the bass, the tempo, and A1 and what's made him very successful and sought after in the R&B world, the interpolation and the manipulation of sound. So this will basically just loop and loop forever for the verse, right? And then when I think about arrangement, I'll just drop the busy parts. And change the pitch of the piano back and forth. You'd have to turn it down. But what's interesting about doing all that and marrying those two styles together is that if I didn't put Gucci Gang, the voice in it, you wouldn't know it was Gucci Gang. I mean, some people would detect it. It'll be familiar. But would you know that I was doing Metro Boomin? Would you know that I was doing Lex Luger or Zaytoven? Or would you say, that MG, he's using that Gucci Gang rhythm? Probably not. 9 times out of 10, you wouldn't guess Big Head beats. So I think my takeaway from this particular video and example is that interpolation is the new sampling, which is perfect for how my mind is wired, because I spent a large chunk of my earlier years in learning how to produce strictly sampling. So my ear's already tuned for all the dope, pieces of songs. And now growing up with you guys, I get to have my ear towards the streets, so to speak, as they used to say back in the day. And I see what you guys are doing. And I go, let's just make that connection. Let's make it official now. Let's call it something. And then, of course, I got my Japanese influence and all that. So hopefully you take away some tidbits from this. Just seeing this workflow, seeing how it works, understanding the different processes. I strongly suggest having multiple sessions for each part of it, because you never know, like with the composition, I might not want to pitch it and time stretch it and change the key. I'm gonna keep that original file there in case I want to reuse it later, or, especially the chord progression, because you can use those 1,000 times just by changing the sound and what key the chord is in. The drum's the same story. I might like that rhythm a whole lot. I could always call it up and augment it instead of starting from scratch every time, and then save a new project out of it and build from there. So I hope this helps you guys. I thank you guys for tuning in and checking us out at the Maschine Masters. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, leave them in the box below. If you're not a subscriber, definitely subscribe. And if you want to hit us up directly, or if you have any questions for me, you can reach us on social media. I'm at MGTheFuture, and also follow at Maschine Masters. Until next time, peace.